Fantastic.
Yay.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm great. Can't complain. Thank you so much for your patience with technology this evening. And
Totally
most
fine.
importantly, yes, thank you for having the time to speak with us today
Yeah.
about such important issues that we have coming up. So for everyone who is tuned in, I am more than happy to present to you, without any further ado, our speaker today, Ms. Cherisse from Sister Reach, and I'm going to allow her to tell us a little bit about herself, about her organization, and then I will get us started on our critical conversation that we're going to be having this evening. So go right ahead, Ms. Cherisse.
Oh, it's so great to be with you all. And thanks so much again for Black Millennials for Flint, for the invitation. And I'm so excited to share this space with you and have this conversation with you today. So I'm CEO and founder of Sister Reach, and we are a reproductive justice organization based in Memphis, Tennessee. We work from a four-pronged strategy of education, policy and advocacy, culture change work, and harm reduction. And our base that we're mobilizing very intentionally and unapologetically is Black women, women and girls of color, low-income folks, LGBT folks, poor folks, men and boys even though our work is centered definitely in the lives of women and girls. But as Black women, we just don't have the luxury to leave our sons and our fathers and our brothers to the side. So
That's
we
right.
organize very intentionally in that way. And I'm just really glad to be here.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again. And you know what? I'm going to jump right into it with our first question. So I really just want to talk about the Supreme Court decision. And so with the recent confirmation of, thank you. I was like,
what be respectful.
thank you. Let's be respectful, Miss Amy.
Yeah.
In lieu of the presidential election, right? Like this happened in 4 weeks, and the election's in just a few days. What are some of the fears surrounding the reproductive justice movement and how this is going to impact Black and Brown communities and all the other communities that you just mentioned that Sister Reach impacts?
Well, I think from our movement, right, we definitely tried to do all that we could to try to dissuade the confirmation of now Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett from being moved on into RBG's seat. And I think that, what we see is a continued pattern of the conservative right of Republicans disregarding the needs of all Americans, disregarding the fears that folks had around federal protections, around abortion access, around LGBT rights, being rolled back, among other things, right? Immigration rights, so many things are hanging in the balance right now. I think that, what we're most concerned with, especially for the work that we do on the ground, is what does it look like for Black and Brown girls and women to try to navigate, trying to access a safe and legal abortion if the protections of the U.S. Constitution are no longer valid. What we are afraid of is that Black women who, many of us who are trying to go ahead, we want to be mothers, but we don't have the economic resources to do what we need to do. We don't have, we don't have proper housing. We don't have proper access to health care. We're making decisions to terminate pregnancies that we want, children that we want to bring into the world, because we just do not have an infrastructure that supports us, right? And so to know that this is the very real opportunity that, Republicans have always wanted this. They've gotten what they wanted. All we can hope is that Justice Barrett will do the right thing, right? And center justice, center the rights of all people, not just a particular party. So the real fears of what it means to have a Republican Supreme Court for folks who look like us, for folks who live and love like us is a totally different thing. And then for LGBT rights, what does it mean for families? What does it mean to potentially dismantle the protections of same-sex marriage, giving folks an opportunity to choose who they love and to be able to legally be protected from situations where, you're the person that, can give the DNR go ahead at the hospital, or you're the person who's supposed to be able to be protected with a life insurance policy that your partner, your wife or your husband or your partner has made sure that you have. Those things are extremely important.
Right.
We want to make sure that, folks continue to have their rights intact. These are, this wasn't just a democratic thing. This is an American issue, right? That this is a human rights issue, and so human rights are on the line. What we know as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
That's right.
Right. And so we're afraid, we're definitely afraid, but we're still going to push on. We're still going to help our people. Right. Whatever we got to do to make sure that women and girls don't die with hanger abortions, that folks don't throw themselves downstairs, or that, that mamas are able to take care of themselves in the ways that they deserve to be able to take care of themselves. Many of us Black mothers are the heads of our household.
Absolutely.
To take those types of protections away from us is to put us in imminent danger.
I'm so glad that you said that, because, this is really a life and death decision for many people. And I think, if nothing else, this confirmation and the importance of it and the discussion around it is really opening people's eyes that maybe weren't paying attention to these type of things, or maybe we're turning a blind eye, and saying, well, I didn't get to vote for my vote doesn't matter because I don't get to vote for the Supreme Court and I'm going to do what I do. There's a lot of conversation that I've heard among people that feel like it's very individualistic versus really realizing the larger context, which you just shared. And I want to take it back a step to something that you said. Everything that you said about not only the way that this decision impacts reproductive health, but also what Sister Reach does. Like you said, you only said abortion one time, maybe two times. But there's a lot within reproductive justice that I think maybe folks are not aware. So if you don't mind, can we take it a step back and not only talk about what is reproductive justice, but how do we as Black folks, as Black women, as Black families, as Black non-conforming people, what does the roots of reproductive justice look like when you tie it into our history?
Absolutely. So a term coined in Chicago in 1994 by 12 Black women, reproductive justice was created to center the lived experiences of Black women around issues of reproductive and sexual health. The framework is grounded in Black feminist theory and human rights. So central to reproductive justice theory is the universal human right to dignity, self-determination, and bodily autonomy. And so this also means that reproductive justice seeks to liberate and emancipate vulnerable populations from all forms of reproductive and sexual oppression. And the framework challenges us to expand our analysis beyond abortion to be inclusive of the myriad of issues that preclude folks from being able to have the reproductive and sexual autonomy that they deserve. So those Black women want to make sure that even in 1994, when this framework was created during the Clinton administration, the last time that we saw a real move for universal health care reform, they wanted to be sure that the package would be comprehensive, right? That the whole person's needs, including their mental, their behavioral, preventive, and interventive care was going to be centered. For Black women, that meant in vitro fertilization and sterilization services. They mandated that they wouldn't endorse a healthcare system that wouldn't definitely cover the full range of reproductive services, which also included abortion, but that it would be for all women, including LGBT people. They want to make sure that it was protected from discrimination, that Black women's input was at all levels of this, leadership on the local, state, and national levels around review, planning, and decision making. And so this is something that was important to Black women, understanding that even in 1994, even with as progressive as a president as we thought we had in the Clinton administration time, right? Because I think that in hindsight, we saw some good pieces about his administration. We saw some bad pieces about his administration. Right. We're still reeling from the super predator narrative and that, and what that has meant on our poor communities, for what the movement for Black Lives has been organizing, for what Black Millennials for Flint was formed around, to make sure that the least of these, right, those who are on the margins, folks who have been abandoned, folks who nobody cares about are being centered in the conversation, and that their voices would be lifted. So that's what the framework was about, right? Making sure that all of our healthcare needs, all of our social wellness, our health wellness, our economic justice, you know, all of the pieces of our lives so that we can thrive and live in a state of abundance was going to be in place. That's what we deserve, right? But here we see, you know, white evangelicals, white male evangelicals really moving forth an agenda of Christian extremism, you know, Christian fascism against those, regardless of what folks believe. It doesn't matter, even if you identify as a Christian and that does not align with your theology or the ways that you understand Jesus's ministry, if you will, right? It was extremely important. It's extremely important to me as somebody who also identifies as a Christian, but somebody who is a Black woman who that doesn't align with what I understand, right? And so lifting up those very important pieces, or what if you're an atheist? And what does it mean for the Religious Freedom Restoration Act to also be on the chopping block? Because that's what we're about to see. That's one of the ways that we've been trying to educate and to mobilize folks on the ground, faith leaders, especially because we're in the Bible Belt. But also on the federal level, that we've got to start paying attention to this very intentional conflation of church and state, and what it means to use that as a way to weaponize that Religious Freedom Act against folks' human rights. So it's going to be abortion and LGBT rights today, but it's going to be your right to vote. It's going to be, your right to assemble on a federal level. That is, it's going to be, your right to your basic human rights as stated in the Declarations of Human Rights of 1948. That's what's on the chopping block. Voting rights are on the chopping block. And then meanwhile, while we have the propaganda and the rhetoric, right, of a sitting president who supports white nationalists in this moment, what that means is that, we're in trouble. Right. And folks are feeling some kind of way about having our rights, not only on the chopping block, but having our rights up for grabs. So that's so the reproductive justice movement embodies all of that. The reproductive justice movement empowers all of that. It empowers folks to be educated and mobilized around all of those issues. And though Black women started this framework, they intentionally invited other women of color into that work. So what's happening in Latinx communities, what's happening with our sister in ICE detention centers, and Don Wooten, come on sis, blew the whistle on them sterilizing mamas in the ICE detention centers in Georgia, all of that. What happened down in Jacksonville, Florida, to Marissa Alexander, who was a victim of domestic violence but was facing 60 years for trying to protect her kids and protect herself, right? The long history of sterilization and violence against Black and brown women in this country, all of that is what's on the chopping block right now, right? And all of that deserves fairness. All of that deserves for us to be mindful of why we need to get out and vote right now. This is the last early voting across this country, right? And we need to get our people out there and be mobilized. Sister Reach is out there right now. We've been at the polls all day, trying to make sure people are out there. We got food trucks and all kinds of stuff. Just, girl, we'll feed you. Just vote. Just come on, bring the babies, whatever you need to do. Folks are standing in the rain, in Memphis, a place that has also had even lower rates of voter turnout. These folks are outside and they are coming to vote and try to, to save their lives and their families.
I think it's so important everything you just said. You just brought us from 1994 back, to now, to Tuesday, to now. And it's so important that we contextualize our Black women's, not only our contribution, but the fact that this is our creation and this is something that we have led. And I think that, we are all about, as Black women, we like, come on in the house, babe, let me give you some cornbread. We're all about welcoming allies. We're all about welcoming partners. But there's something in this particular conversation and in the particular conversation of Miss Amy that certain partners and certain allies may have whitewashed the efforts and the history of what Black women have created, which is reproductive justice. And, it really needs to be stated and it needs to be said that this is our history. This is something that we continue to fight for babies that aren't even here yet, for grandmothers who aren't even here yet, because those next
future.
babies, come on now,
Yeah,
you know, and I think because of, you know, certain marches that have happened and certain women who are on the cover of, you know, XYZ newspaper and certain, you know, images that are put out there are saying not only that we're not there, we're not invited, we're not welcome. And it's like, but this is our thing, you know? But let me not get too off track. Everything that you just mentioned when you talk about the movement that we're experiencing now, these are also the voters that are here now. These are from 18 and up, you know, the young demonstrators, all the way up to the wise folks who raised them to be demonstrators. And so you've just started on it, and so I just want to take it a step further. When it comes to Tuesday, 4.5 days away, you know, depending on what time zone you're in, what should voters, not only what should voters think regarding maternal health and reproductive justice, but what do they need to be aware of? Where can they act when they have their ballot and their pen and their paper in hand? It depends on the state. What do they need to be taking into consideration? And then how can they really make their vote matter next week when it comes to not only the next 4 years, but really the trajectory of history?
We've really been trying to talk to folks on the ground about voting their values, the things that matter to them. Very basic things like healthcare, right? Down in the red states, Medicaid expansion is not even a conversation. However, we have some of the highest maternal mortality and infant morbidity rates across the country are in Mississippi, are in Tennessee, are in Louisiana, are in Georgia, are, you know, in these areas where, you know, some of the beginnings of our history in this country, you know, enslaved on plantations, here we are in the same area of the country where we're not being taken care of in 2020. So we're really looking for folks to really keep those things in mind. You're voting for healthcare when you vote. And by, you know, between now and November 3rd, you're voting for your ability to be able to continue to assemble, to continue to raise your voice. You're voting for your ability, you know, to you know, love who you love. You're voting for your ability to fight for $15 in the union. You know, you're fighting for your ability to push back on legislators and hold, you know, folks accountable not only on the state but at the federal level, right, around Flint not having, you know, proper a water pipe system even to this moment, right? We're fighting for our ability to raise our voices, because what this country seems to be quickly moving into is a dictatorship, right? Is with fascist leadership. Right. And so we're voting for our ability to still have a democracy. Right. We're voting for our ability to be able to make decisions at the ballot box, to still fight for opportunities to reduce voter suppression. Right. We're voting. So we're asking people to think about the things that matter to you right now. You know, your ability to move about. I think that COVID-19, we are voting, right, for somebody to be in the White House who will take COVID-19 seriously, right, with over 225,000 Americans dead right now, and thousands of Americans that have already been impacted by COVID-19, whether they contracted the virus or, you know, have lost a loved one or know someone who has contracted the virus. You're voting for your ability to keep your small business open, right? Especially if you are a minority business owner, whether that be a person of color or whether that be a woman, right? You're voting for your ability to continue to fight back against voter ID laws, right? You're voting for your ability to shift this country in a way that supports the needs of all people, not just certain people, not just folks with money, not just folks with privilege. You know, you're voting for your ability for you to not be overly taxed while the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, right? That's what we're voting for. We're voting to live. We're voting to save our lives. We're voting to save our lives because clearly others are concerned about our lives. We're not seeing that coming out of the White House. We're just not seeing it. And you know, whether I'm speaking as the CEO of Sister Reach or as a taxpayer and as a voter, as a Black mama, You see what I'm saying? Because I don't I come to this work as a Black mom. I come to this work as my mama's child. I come to this work as my grandmama's baby. You know what I'm saying? I come to this work as somebody who started this organization while I was on my mama's couch, coming home to take care of her, to help take care of her, because Tennessee did not expand Medicaid to make sure that she could live. My mother, we lost my mama 2 years ago, right? Because she had to make a decision to be able to afford prescriptions to support her having liver cancer and not wanting to burden her family. She made a decision to die so that she would not impact our family trying to live, right? That's what we're voting for. We're voting for people to not have to make life and death decisions because they don't have access to health care, right? So when I think, so it's a very personal thing for me going to the ballot box. My baby turned 18 years old this year. He went with me to the polls, right? And I was like, he was like, so mama, you know, I was like, son, vote like I raised you. That's how I need you to vote. It's not about me telling you how to vote. You vote like I raised you. You knew how, you know, I started Sister Reach on my mama's couch. The first 3 years of 3.5 years of Sister Reach, I was on food stamps while I was doing Sister Reach. It's only on this side of Sister Reach that I'm able to take care of my baby and take care of myself in a way that makes sense. That's what we're voting for. We're just voting for this. That's all. We shouldn't have to struggle, you know, and scrape in order to live, while other people can just move about, right? With no recourse, with no, you know, no setbacks. Folks are taking full setbacks to live. That's what we're voting for. So, you know, y'all vote for my mama, okay, for her legacy, right? So that's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for folks to really take into consideration the things that matter. We're voting for Social Security, right? That our generation may not be able to even have a benefit of, right? That's what we're voting for. We're voting for our ability to be able to take care of ourselves when we are old, right? For our children, for our grandchildren, for the people who are not here. We're voting for a climate. We're voting for a globe that's burning up, right? We're voting for California. You know what I'm saying? We're voting for the fires to stop. We're voting for Louisiana, for the hurricanes not to impact New Orleans and people not give a damn, right? We're voting for Flint, for somebody to care about people drinking water, those mothers drinking water, babies being born with birth defects, people contracting cancer. That's what we're voting for. We're voting for somebody to care about us, right? So this is, you know, I recognize that even in the Black community, we're a little split around, you know, who we voting for and how we're voting. I'm saying vote in the way that makes common sense, right? You want to change the dynamic? Then let's think about how we get the person who is most capable of us even being able to have a real conversation with in the White House. And then we can have another conversation about, you know, calling them in and working to move change after we get somebody in there who actually even knows about, who won't dismantle the pandemic team because the Black man put it in place. You see what I'm saying? Woo! That's what we're voting for. So, you know, I just want us to use our common sense right now, right? I want us to vote like we care about our neighbor right now, right? I need us to vote for those who aren't here. We got to vote for Breonna Taylor. She's not here to vote. We got to vote for George Floyd. He's not here to vote. We got to vote for Trayvon, who would have been eligible to vote. Right? We got to vote for those who allow Mike Brown to lay in the streets. We got and just not care. We got to vote for those who are not here to vote for themselves, right? For the legacy. We got to vote for what our ancestors were hoping that we would be able to benefit from, even if they couldn't benefit from it. I'm not gonna give no, you know, sad story, right, about our ancestors died, but you know, okay, I'm saying we are here because we stand on the shoulders of folks who did a whole bunch of injustice for us to be able to sit on Instagram cute and have this conversation. That's
right about that.
You know, that's all. So I really want us to take into account, and all of that is what reproductive justice is about, right? Because reproductive justice is a human rights model. It's a human rights framework. And if any element of human rights is out of whack, then we've lost the opportunity to fully realize what those 12 Black women in Chicago who came together at a conference, who wanted to make sure that their voices were heard and their culture was centered, that their lived experiences was acknowledged, created a framework for all of us to be able to benefit off of, right? For Kimberly Crenshaw, creating intersectionality. You know what I'm saying? For Audre Lorde, telling us that we don't live single issue lives, and that's why we don't organize around single issues, right?
That's right.
We're voting for more, right? We're voting for so much more than one or two hot topics, right? And I understand that folks are also making decisions about who they're going to vote for and not going to vote for based on one or two topics. But let's do some homework on these folks, right? Let's do some homework about the legacy of violence that continues to grow. Let's we're voting for a sitting president not to call out white nationalists and ask them to stand by. That's what we voted for, man. You know what I'm saying? So that's what we've been trying to mobilize people around. Very real conversations, kitchen table conversations, what our grandmamas talk about while they combing our hair, you know, what folks are talking about over the dinner table, what folks are trying to grapple over their bills. We're talking about that. That's what we're trying to get people out to vote for. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your remarks. And let me just say, I just want to honor the life and legacy of your mother and that ultimate sacrifice. And I am so appreciative that you felt trusting of us and the followers tonight to share that with us, because if nothing else, who you are, who you've become, who you continue to be, and who your son is also, with what he's doing, voting and everything that he's doing with him and his peers, you are such if you are an embodiment of who she is, who she was, and who she raised you right to be, we are even more grateful we being Black Millennials for Flint, we being Vanessa, to be in connection with you, to be in sisterhood with you. And I'm just so grateful for that. That's some Sankofa that, like, I just can't not, I can't just keep going with, I have to say that, especially with how much I love my mom. And how I try to be a reflection of her in everything that I do, including my voting, including my activism, including speaking with you this evening. I just want to send some love and some ashe to you.
Thank you.
And going back to something that you said, and then we're going to move on to another question. But I was very I had a little light bulb when you mentioned, that folks kind of focus on maybe one or two issues. You also mentioned making sure you're doing your research. I think, I want to kind of talk about connecting the dots between federal and local, because I think, with the media, we're hearing so much about some of the big ticket issues that you're talking about. But when we look at communities right now that are reeling, when we look at what's going on in Philadelphia and we say, how could we have prevented this foolishness? When we look around what just happened here in DC, when a gentleman was killed being chased down by the police, like, what can you speak briefly about connecting, when you're saying if you're voting for your neighbors, what is that connection between the local and the state as it pertains to this 4-year, election? There are people who just vote every 4 years, but how can we encourage them in the maternal health and reproductive justice context, as well as obviously just life or death, right? Because it all falls under that umbrella, to remain engaged and maybe even give them encouragement on how to remain engaged when it comes to that local conversation, that day-to-day impact.
Yeah. And I know that people are always mobilized most around the presidential election, right? Because, that's the big one, right? But I think that people don't really understand that the things that happen on the state level are the things that are impacting us in the states in which we live, right? And also the things that are happening on the local level, right? And we work on all three levels intentionally because we recognize that there's power in each piece, and each, and one informs the other, which informs the other. So yes, there's federal policy. That's the U.S. Constitution piece, right? That's the, all of the federal pieces, right? But then you have like the state pieces, the things like, your health care, that's a state issue, right? But then you have like a local issue, like your city council, your county commissioners in different, I used to live in Chicago, so like your aldermen, right? Folks that impact, what's going on with the utility company and what's happening with what's going on the school board, right? So those types of folks, so it's really important because we've definitely seen lower turnout and more opportunities for voter suppression on the local level, where there's not as much oversight as it is during a presidential election. And yes, the presidential election is absolutely imperative, right? But it's what's happening on the federal level that empowers your governor, that empowers your Congress, right? That empower, and then you got your senators, right? And then you got your state representatives, right? But then and all of that is important pieces, right? So there's still areas of and definitely not a policy guru, but there's still different areas of government where it's important to vote on every level for different issues. But I think that let's focus on that local issue for a second. Let's focus on and even if we focus on the state and how resources are given to fight things like maternal morbidity and infant mortality, even down here in Memphis, right? Money coming down from the state level for that, and then that being disseminated many times to those larger agencies and hospitals and things like that. But you still have the pieces where your city council, that's your city infrastructure. That's the piece for Flint, right? For example, right? That's that piece of making sure, what's happening on the local level affects the potholes. It affects whether or not they're putting smart meters on your house and you can't monitor whether or not they're jacking up your light bill, those types of things. So we've got to be able to be engaged and vote on every level. This is where your civil review boards over the police, this is where that comes in, right? Also still though emboldened by state-based policies, even in the state and in the House, that impact your ability to be safe, or for there to be some oversight and regulation over what is happening kind of in these locales. And so it's important to be engaged and educated on all of those pieces, right? I think that's one of the things that we think is really important for our community, especially for the Black community, because I don't think that we're fully educated, right? And it's kind of hard to articulate even for me. And we do this kind of work all the time, right? I'm not the policy person at Sister Reach, but we fight for policy at Sister Reach, right? And just making sure, we want to make sure that folks really understand these different dynamics, that are able to show up for those local elections, to make sure that the person who is representing you on the local level also is aligned with the values that you support, right? And that the people that you vote for on that state level are also aligned in partnership with what is happening on the ground. And then, knowing that you still have that alignment all the way up into the federal level, so that when we're talking about the presidency, when we're talking about Congress, that it's still folks who are able to, support what's happening in foreign policy, what's happening on the global stage is still impacting what is happening here domestically, right? And that's another part of reproductive justice, connecting the global to the domestic or to the local, showing those real opportunities, not only for education and for advocacy, like, what's happening in South Africa around HIV versus what's happening here in the South around HIV.
And
right?
What's happening in Nigeria with the police and what's happening here with the police.
Absolutely, right? In SARS, you know what I'm saying? In SARS, for our brothers and our sisters over there being impacted because of their human rights being violated. So if we're not, kind of keeping our eyes on the prize, keeping our finger on the pulse and educating ourselves as much as we can about what's happening on these different levels, this is where we're missing votes. I think that, we got a little too comfortable during the Obama administration. Folks stopped turning out for local elections when Obama was president, because I think for those 8 years, we thought that we were good, right? That we didn't have to do, oh my God, we can finally take a breath. But it was in those breaths that we lost Senate seats, that we lost House seats, that we lost congressional seats, and we lost power, right? And when I say power, I don't mean power to make folks do what we want them to do, but power to have politicians in position who would make sure that they would at least fight for us to have a fair opportunity at justice and access, right? So I think that we got to just go ahead and take that lump for not even, potentially mobilizing the communities that we should have been, making sure that our people understood the political process and were civically engaged and had education and were able to participate in that process. I think because we did not do that, we lost a very crucial time, where now we have, the Senate, for example, these are folks who are voting on this confirmation of Amy. You know what I'm saying? And so it was it was important that we didn't, lose those really important seats, right? It was important. It mattered. And we've not been able to recover, right? So, I mean, we can blame or we can accept some level of responsibility for the ways in which we were not organized and mobilized in the ways potentially that we could have been and should have been to ensure that we were safe for such a time as right now. Right. Oh, I saw Representative London Lamar was on London. Look, I hope I did a half bit of justice.
Shout out to London Lamar.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
So I want to reply to something you said about, folks kind of taking a breath during that 8 years of President Obama. When we talk about the legacy of the environment, we can also talk about, there were so many policies that we thought were moving us forward. And then this current president rolled those back. And so now here we are where we are in, once again, this very pivotal presidential election and also very pivotal local elections in states across the country where the environment is one of the hottest topics. It's one of the primary topics being discussed. Younger generations have said that they think that this is one of the most important topics for their generation is the environment. And it was discussed heavily during the presidential debates. And so when we talk about this intersection between environmental justice and reproductive justice, in particular for Black and Brown communities, for historically and currently disenfranchised and discriminated against communities. If you don't mind talking to us a little bit about wrapping up, the conversation about the impact, the intersection between environmental justice, reproductive justice, and in particular how this intersection impacts this maternal and infant morbidity and mortality crisis that we're looking at across this great country.
Absolutely. I think that, for many of us who maybe haven't kind of kept our eyes on the pulse of what was happening in the environmental justice world, maybe for many of us, we kind of were awakened around what happened with Flint. We were awakened with what happened around Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and some other historic kind of things that have happened over the last even 10, 15 years. But I think that when I think about reproductive and that all of that is a part of and a continuum of what the RJ framework is addressing. But I also think one of the things that we talk about in Black Mamas Matter, Sister Reach is a kindred partner where, we were definitely a part of that work when it was the foundations of that was coming together, helping to inform what was happening from our vantage point of working with mothers down here in Memphis. I think that one of the things that we've lifted up with Black Mamas Matter is that racism is also a part of our environmental justice, right? That it's impacting folks' ability to live. That it's impacting folks' ability to to not be worried about your children coming to and from home, right? Like those pieces as well. That thinking about the ways that urban gentrification, for example, have also impacted low-income communities and communities of color, where many Black and Brown people are living, right? So you don't see 18-wheelers rolling through the affluent neighborhoods, but 18-wheelers are rolling through the hood, right? Cell phone towers being erected, dumping sites in our communities, because this really comes down to who deserves to be a parent, who deserves to have a family, who deserves to be healthy, and who does not. And we're talking about when there is a white supremacist narrative on, that community being the have and everybody else being the have-nots. What we're seeing is a disinvestment in our communities. All of that, from our vantage point of reproductive justice, is included in what we understand environmental justice also to mean when there's a fight for that. So what does it look like then, for there to be a food desert? That's an environmental justice issue, right? And what does it look like for there to, be lack of transportation to get to and from work, to and from school? Those are environmental justice issues. Those are social issues that are connected to one another. And that's the whole thing I think that we've always tried to do with this reproductive justice framework over these last 26 years, is to continue to connect it to these other issues that if I can't if these things are in place, I can't parent in the ways that I need to and that I would like to. I can't thrive, right? My family can't live. We were just, I saw somebody was posting the other day talking about a area of North Memphis that, for years has been disinvested in until here recently, where there's been more investment in the communities where you could buy a house for $15,000 and now you can get a house for $200,000 or $250,000, pricing Black folks out of that area. That's an environmental justice issue as well, right? So, and if I don't have, I'm going to be displaced, or closing down schools in my neighborhood, you're pushing me out of, you're pushing me out of my neighborhood because you want to be, you want to create this, this fiction, right, of what our community, of what our city really looks like, without investing in the fact that this city in particular is over 70% African American. But African Americans don't hold power. African Americans, don't have the time many times to get organized around trying to push, urban development in our communities, or dumping sites in our communities. We on the ground, we working 2 and 3 jobs. So many times it's hard to organize around some of these issues, right? So I think that's one of the some of the connections to be considered, right? Where reproductive oppression, where sexual oppression comes into the conversation, the exploitation, of our bodies, the exploitation of our communities, right? As well, police sanctioned violence, that's still in many ways still connected to environmental justice. That's still a lens there that can be applied about the ways that people feel safe or do not feel safe to thrive. So yes, I mean, that's definitely, of course, our good sister, yourself included, can bring even more clarity to that. But when we think about it from a reproductive justice standpoint, that's some of the things that we looked up. We looked up that Black mamas are dying because of racism. You know what I'm saying? Black mamas are dying because of not having proper access, to healthy fruits and vegetables in their community, right? If all I can access in my, my corner store is potted meat and hot sauce and pork and, all of these things that have proven to have dire impacts on my health and wellness. If I, you want to shame me because I'm a teenager and I'm pregnant, I'm eating hot Cheetos, right? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, we can have, plant-based is sexy right now, right? But what does that look like when you're living in the hood? When in the Whole Foods will suck up your entire check or your entire food stamp, card or whatever.
Whole paycheck. It is whole paycheck. And you go in there and it's like, what is Romanesco? What is frisee? You have mothers trying to feed their family right, but this is not a staple. How do I prepare this?
Right. So all of those things fall up under environmental justice and our ability to live, our ability to sustain ourselves and our families and be well, right? We're fighting obesity, we're fighting high blood pressure, but those things are also being our impacts or, effects, right, of these other larger issues that continue to impact our communities.
Yeah, like stress. Like the stress of everything that you just said, and like the stress of every mama and future mama turning on the TV or turning on social media and seeing some other mama's baby being murdered.
Yes.
So by a member of the state, by a tax-paid person killing somebody's baby, and you wonder why people have high blood pressure. It's not. Look, let me not get cut off in the middle of this conversation because
it's 6:52. We got 8 more minutes.
Right, we got a couple more minutes. Let me say something too, because everything. I'm so grateful for this conversation. I honor everything that you've said, and when you talked about specifically the environment everywhere, but specifically what's going on in Flint. And, we have noticed and been informed and found out that, some of the people responsible for murdering and harming people in that community were elected officials, and making sure to remain engaged in the local. Black Millennials for Flint has previously had conversations, around the census as well. And, it's over now, but we also talk about, those type of engagements, education around those type of engagements, and how, that long-term planning, there's a lot of long-term planning that happens. And these decisions are made and they're presented to families and communities who may not have enough time to sit there and get the information. Like you said, if you had the time to ask the question.
You see what I'm saying? What does it mean if I got to let you know that's, that my cousin and my auntie live in my house?
Come on now.
Okay, like, what is that going to mean? People don't trust. But go ahead.
You're knocking on my door today, asking me about something in 10 years. It's challenging to feel like you want to have that conversation. It's challenging when the person that's there is not the same person who can actually answer your questions. And it's the same thing, with the election. I would argue is that, when you go to the polls, there's not often a person there to answer those questions. And you go, online, or you go to, and you may or may, that's something about this current presidential administration. It's mixed information has been such a dastardly tool and such an effective poison. It's misinformation, confusing information. And so I really want to reiterate something that you said earlier about, vote. I need this on a shirt. Vote like he was raised right. I wish we had this shirt a few months ago. That just needs to be a hashtag at this point, hashtag vote like he was raised right. Vote like you have some common sense. Because at the end of the day, if you do show up at election day, and maybe you haven't spent the 5 days prior, right? Because today we have 5 days, getting the information that you need, getting the questions answered. We don't feel like you vote how you can. Vote how you can, vote to the best of your ability. I used to be in improv theater, and we would say to the top of your intelligence, vote to the top of your wisdom, to the top of your intuition, because we trust you. Black women, we trust our community. We trust our friends and family. We trust that you're going to do the right thing, not just for the next 4 years, but moving forward. I'm going to trust that everybody listening is going to do the right thing for my future babies and my future grandchildren. And so just vote like you got some common sense. And so before we wrap, wait, hold on. I had a train of thought. Let me see if I can remember what my train of thought was. Oh, I know what I was going to share. Another thing that you mentioned about healthcare is, with COVID-19 right now, there's a lot of foolishness happening in hospitals where, policies are being changed, or policies are kind of being created in the moment when Black family members, when Black support staff, whether that's a doula, whether that's a midwife that doesn't work at the hospital, whether that's just Big Mama, whether that's just the other kids, are showing up. And even though this is a little off topic and not on the script, I actually just want to implore everyone who's listening to make sure you document these things that are happening. And reach out to the leadership in your community, because some of the hospitals that aren't private hospitals in your community are being run by your taxpayers' dollars. And for them to not only shut you out, but then to bring you in to treat you disrespectfully, to not allow your child to have a sacred welcoming into this country, into this world, that's unacceptable. It's disgusting. It's something that, there are policies in some places where some sanctions can happen. But I had recently got off a call right before this about some of the mistreatment of doulas and birth workers that are trying to protect birth justice, or trying to protect reproductive justice to the best of their ability, and are being faced with uninformed, ignorant staff who are fragile, who are incompetent, and who are uninformed themselves, and are using, and are unfortunately using confusion to not allow mothers and families to have the support that they had planned to have, right? And that's an intersection with the environment, because we would not be having a lot of this last minute policy change pre-COVID, right? Because of COVID, there's a lot of restrictions about how many people can be present, how many people can be in, because of social distancing, how many people can be in a certain space. There's these last minute, oh, you're the doula? Let me see your certification. Let me see proof of your flu shot. Let me see proof. I'm sorry, who are you? I don't work for the hospital. I work for this mama. So you're not going to ask me to show you a flu shot when you didn't even have to have a flu shot. You're not going to ask me to show you a COVID test when her water just broke. So how was I supposed to know that I was supposed to have a COVID test when the baby just said, I'm ready today? So I don't know why my spirit moved me to say that, but I really, we
it's still an environmental justice issue. It still is relevant. It's still a reproductive justice issue, especially for teen mamas, especially for undocumented folks who are Spanish speaking or other than English speaking, right? What does it mean to not have a translator present? What does it mean for somebody not to carry out your birth plan, right? What does it look like for high risk mothers? Like, all of that matters. All of that is still an environmental justice issue, and it is still at the intersection of reproductive justice. So I definitely think that I think that you were right on it. I don't think it was off topic at all. I think that, it's the continuum, right? It's the continuum about what does it mean to continue to treat people with dignity and respect? Because look here, folks who, we're making decisions to allow business to run as usual for what we deem important versus not important business, right? And the business of Black motherhood, the business of brown motherhood has always been secondary, except for when it was important to fuel the labor force of this country, right?
Come on now.
It was important to make sure that, your Latinx maid or your Latinx butler or your Latinx lawn care provider or your Latinx person working on the top of your house can do that, while you live your posh life. So, we make decisions about what is and is not important based on who we value. And the bottom line is that because Black and brown mamas aren't valued, then most definitely the folks that we bring in to support us through the most vulnerable time outside of dying, right, in our lives, right, would not be allowed to be there to hold our hand, to rub our back, to make sure that our healthcare decisions when we are in the midst of high levels of pain are being able to be communicated. Oh, no, you were on the same page. We on the same page.
Right. Okay, good. Because my spirit, that was where my spirit was. And I have to honor the life of Dr. Shanice Wallace. I have to honor the life of Shayasia Washington, women who, trusted doctors who failed them and have lost their young lives because they trusted a system who doesn't value them and didn't value the concerns of their loved ones who were present. We have this picture of, oh, well, she must have been by herself. No, they booze was there, their family was there, their support staff was there, but they was Black too.
Yeah.
Hello.
Come on.
Hello. So if Serena and her billions of dollars and her white husband wasn't protected, what? Come on. How are we going to come on now. So I know we're at time. I want to thank everybody who tuned in this evening. You all already know how to follow us, but please tell everyone how they can follow the work of Sister Reach in Memphis, Tennessee, and continue to remain engaged.
Absolutely. Just go to our website at sisterreach.org. You can follow us right here on Instagram at Sister Reach, and we're sisterreach.org. You can follow us on Facebook. We're also on Twitter, but definitely follow us. Invest in our work. Invest in Black women doing this work. Invest in Black leadership. Invest in a framework that was crafted by Black women for Black people, brown people, and all other marginalized populations. Invest in it, right? Because nobody can speak on behalf of us the way that we can. Nobody can move our populations like we can. Nobody trusts us like our community does. And so you want to continue to make sure that organizations like Black Millennials for Flint, like Sister Reach, like Dr. Vanessa are on point. And well, I'm speaking of things that be
yeah, let me defend, honey.
Come on, sis. Come on. You know what I mean? Are in place. We need our doulas. We need our midwives. We need them to be able to get paid for their work. We need for it to be at no cost and low cost for low income, unhoused young mamas. We need you all. We have to have you all. I wish I had a doula when I had my son with the complications that I experienced. I wish I had a midwife when I had my baby, right? When the epidural was put in my back and both of our heart rates dropped. I wish that I had a you, right? And I didn't, right? And that was, my mother told me in that moment, because she was there, she's like, I know you're not gonna have another child because I think that if you do, you won't live. So don't get pregnant. You know what I'm saying? Like that. Like that's the reality. And I couldn't trust the doctor. I had to listen to my mom. Right. Like that's who I trusted in that moment. That's who was in the room with me. Right. So I totally feel that. So yeah, please invest in our work, continue to invest in our work, and continue to invest in the work of Black millennials for Flint.
Thank you so much. And most importantly, on Tuesday,
vote, baby.
Vote like you was raised right. Okay? Vote like you was raised right.
Yeah,
thank you so much. Oh, yes, everyone depends on you. Okay. So I would just want to thank everyone so much, and we're going to wrap up. And thank you so much, Cherisse. We really appreciate you tonight.
You're very welcome.
Have a good one.
All right. Trust Black women.
Trust Black women.
Peace, y'all.
All right. Good night.
Good night.